Seats occupied by pilot flying. The pilot flying the aircraft, whether PIC or SIC, should only manipulate the flight controls from a cockpit seat position. They have been previously trained or checked in for that make and model of aircraft. Any trainee captain or check airman may flight train a pilot and authorize him or her to fly from a different seat when satisfied that the pilot is proficient in the operation of the aircraft. If not checked in a flying seat, the following should apply. Landings and takeoffs should be made only during daylight hours with VFR visibilities. If IFR, the qualified pilot shall make the takeoff and landing, and the other pilot should not manipulate the flight controls below 1,000 feet. Trade and aviation flight instructor or check airman may occupy any pilot seat.
Ryan, who's our check airman?
Adam and Eric are the check airmen for the company. Alright. SIC flying restrictions. Alright, Chapter 3, this is where you can find all this stuff. Alright, there's a whole bunch of things in here. So basically 50-hour flight time, 25 hours, 10 landings in the same make and model will not perform takeoff or landings with passengers on board. This doesn't mean that you have to have your left seat check out as well. Alright, so PICs, if your guy is still seat locked and he has 70 hours in the airplane and you feel like he can fly passengers, he can fly passengers. He can fly passengers from the right seat, but he can still fly passengers. With these limitations. With some of these limitations here. Alright, you guys know where to find this in Chapter 3. We're not going to go over all this stuff. Okay? Is that okay with you? Good. Pilot pairing. When due to conditions beyond our control, a PIC with less than 200 hours of flight time, PIC or SIC, in the make and model of aircraft is paired with an SIC with less than 100 hours of flight time in the same make and model of aircraft, the following limitations shall apply. Same thing, bunch of limitations here, talking about snow-covered runways, winds, crosswind component. Same thing, Chapter 3 in the GOM, you can find all this stuff. Good? Flight following. What is operational control and who is responsible for it? Operational control includes, but is not limited to, the performance of the following: ensuring that only those operations authorized by our op specs are conducted, ensuring that only crew members trained and qualified in accordance with the applicable regulations are assigned to conduct flights, ensuring that crew members are in compliance with flight and duty time requirements with departing on a flight, designating a PIC for each flight, providing the PIC with access to the necessary information for the safe conduct of the flight, specifying the conditions under which a flight may be released, it's weather, flight planning, airworthiness, ensuring that each flight has complied with the conditions specified for release, ensuring that when the conditions specified for a flight's release cannot be met, the flight is either canceled, delayed, rerouted, or diverted, monitoring the progress of each flight and initiating timely actions when the flight cannot be completed as planned, including diverting or terminating a flight. Exercising operational control. Management personnel identified as having operational control of a flight are those given overall responsibilities for each flight. Those persons are the President, the DO, Chief Pilot, and the Director of Maintenance. The PIC and the management personnel exercising operational control are jointly responsible for the initiation, continuation, diversion, and termination of a flight in compliance with the FAR's and Tradewind Aviation's op specs. Management personnel exercising operational control are responsible for canceling, diverting, or delaying a flight if, in his or her opinion, or in the opinion of the PIC, the flight cannot operate or continue to operate safely as planned. The management personnel exercising operational control are responsible for ensuring that each flight is monitored with respect to at least the following: departure of the flight from the place of origin and arrival at the place of destination, including intermediate stops and diversions, maintenance and mechanical delays encountered at place of origin and destination and intermediate stops, any known conditions that may adversely affect the safety of flight. When a pilot is assigned to fly over a route or into an airport to which he has not flown within 90 days, he or she will so advise the chief pilot, and under the supervision of the chief pilot will accomplish the following items. Determine the route to be flown and the applicable altitudes. Be aware of all en route aids to navigation and communication stations. Study the terrain over which the flight is to be made. Be aware of all en route and slightly off route airports. Study all available information, including NOTAMs, concerning the airport of intended landing. For night flights, be aware of all available lighting aids. Be aware of all airspace restrictions. For IFR flights, study all en route approach and landing charts.
So every airport we haven't gone to in 90 days, we're supposed to sit down with you and hold hands?
I really don't want to hold your hand. Apparently.
Okay.
I would think that it was more if you had more questions on what's going on, bring it forward, but other than that, your PIC should hopefully be able to take care of these things.
That's just applicable to PICs.
Yes.
As pilot.
Yeah. It's always nice for when your SIC shows up and knows more about the airport, in my opinion. I love that. Hey, you did your homework. So where are we going today? Flight plans. VFR or IFR flight plans properly filed with the appropriate agency are used for all Part 135 flights. Crew qualifications. PIC qualifications. PIC will hold an ATP certificate unless a commercial pilot certificate is permitted by regulation in the DO, and if applicable, an instrument and multi-engine rating. PIC must have at least 25 hours of flight time as a pilot, 2,500 hours as a pilot, including 500 hours of cross-country flight time, 100 hours of night flight time, including at least 10 night takeoffs and landings, 200 hours of actual or simulated instrument flight time, at least 50 hours of which were actual flight. The DO may waive these minimum qualifications at his discretion, so long as the pilot meets the minimum requirements of 14 CFR 135. At least first class medical. Turbojet and large aircraft operations may require additional certificates and ratings. It is the responsibility of the Director of Operations to ensure that the PIC assigned is appropriately qualified. Additional requirements may be imposed in order for insurance coverage to remain in effect for a particular flight or to meet requirements of certain customers. It is the responsibility of the Director of Operations to ensure that the PIC is assigned is appropriately qualified. Alright, that comes into like Argus crew. Sometimes you hear like, oh, we need an Argus crew for a flight. That's where that last portion comes in to make sure that you are Argus qualified. SICs. The SIC must hold at least a commercial pilot certificate with appropriate category and class ratings and an instrument rating if conducting IFR operations. SIC must have at least 1,000 hours of flight time as PIC as a pilot and 100 hours of actual instrument flight time. The DO may waive these minimum qualifications at his discretion. A current first class or second class medical certificate as well. Alright, 293 ride, basic compliancy check with the aircraft. No crew member assignment will be made or accepted unless within the past 12 calendar months the crew member have passed this check under 135-293 for the aircraft to which the crew members are assigned. In order to maintain a currency, a pilot must have made 3 takeoffs and landings within the preceding 90 days in the same category and class or type of airplane if a type rating is required. Takeoffs and landings may be performed in an approved simulator. If the PIC is to serve at night, then the currency must be flown at night. If currency is not maintained, it may be reestablished by making 3 takeoffs and landings or in accordance with Tradewind Aviation's approved training program. IFR currency. No PIC mate will be assigned and no pilot may accept an assignment as PIC for IFR flight under Part 135 unless within the previous 6 months he has passed an IFR Proficiency check in accordance of 135-297. PIC may not make any type of precision instrument approach under IFR unless that type of approach procedure was satisfactorily demonstrated on the last IFR check. A non-precision approach may be flown if the approach procedure or any other two non-precision approaches were demonstrated on the last IFR proficiency check. Questions? Pretty straightforward. Line checks. No pilot may be assigned and no pilot may accept an assignment as PIC under Part 135 unless they have passed a line check in accordance with 135-299 within the past 12 calendar months. SICs must be current for IFR under the requirements for recent IFR experience in 6157. Check ride grace month provisions. So check rides have a grace month provision allowing continued operation flights up to 1 calendar month past the normal check ride date. Check rides taken in the grace period do not change the base month determined of the original check ride requirement. Under this doctrine, crew members may also take a check ride 1 month earlier. All right. As a company, we try to do your training flight the month prior to you being due, but you could take a check ride up to the month after you being due. All right, so May's your base month. You can do your training in April and take your check ride up until June 30th. All right. When it comes to aircraft currency, IFR, night landings, things like that, if you need night landings, contact the office, contact Chief Pilot, Director of Operations, Dispatch. They're usually pretty good with giving flexibility on letting you guys do night landings on you coming back in. Guys in the Caribbean, strongly recommend if you are empty, coming back into San Juan at night to at least try to give yourself some sort of instrument approach. I know it's tough sometimes after those days, but staying IFR current is the best thing you can stay for yourself. We ran into issues with some new upgrades that were extremely rusty with IFR procedures because they didn't do that. So kind of stay on top of yourselves with that one. Just ask for it. Even if you don't ask for it, vector yourself and fly the approach. That way you're at least flying an instrument approach. San Juan's usually pretty good with asking for that. Same thing within here. If you're coming back at the end of the night and you want to do an approach into Oxford, New York's usually pretty flexible with that. They'll basically just give you direct to Cutma. Alright. Loading. Funny guy, Nick Ogles. We talked about this already, so we're going to go ahead and skip over this. Flight operations. Determining aircraft airworthiness. How do we know if the aircraft is airworthy?
Status sheet.
Status sheet. What else?
Pre-flight.
Pre-flight. What else?
Scrubs log.
Alright. Checking your MEL. Kyle just talked about. All that good stuff. PIC is responsible for ensuring that all pre-flight preparations and planning are accomplished in accordance with applicable FAA regulations and trade-wind aviation directives. All right. Basically, that's just checking the weather, making sure that your airplane is airworthy, all that good stuff. All right. Questions on that? All right. Use of oxygen. Unpressurized aircraft flight above 10,000 feet MSL but less than 12,000 feet MSL for more than 30 minutes and at all times above 12,000 feet MSL. In a small aircraft, ensure that the crew is using a pilot's masks, as some aircraft have flow restrictions for different masks on the same aircraft. Pressurized aircraft. With cabin pressure altitudes above 10,000 feet MSL, follow the procedure for an unpressurized aircraft. Between flight level 250 and 350, the crew must have quick donning masks available and one pilot must wear a mask if the other leaves the cockpit. Above 350, one pilot must have the oxygen mask on at all times. Unless the pilot has a quick donning mask, single pilot air carrier operations above flight level 250 require that the pilot to wear the mask at all times as well. For flight above 10,000 feet MSL, but less than 15,000 feet MSL. For more than 30 minutes, the aircraft must have supplemental oxygen for at least 10% of the passengers for that part of the flight that is above 10,000 feet. For flight at and above 15,000 feet, the aircraft must have supplemental oxygen for each passenger. No pressurized aircraft may depart with more passengers than oxygen masks. Do not operate at altitudes above 25,000 feet MSL unless there is at least 10-minute supply of supplemental oxygen available for each occupant of the aircraft other than the pilots, for use when a descent is necessary due to loss of cabin pressure. Unless the aircraft is equipped with enough oxygen dispensers and oxygen to comply with the unpressurized aircraft requirements listed above, whenever the cabin pressure altitude exceeds 10,000 feet MSL, and if the cabin pressurization fails, to provide a 2-hour supply for each pilot, whichever is greater, and to supply, when flying, at altitudes above 10,000 feet MSL, oxygen to at least 10% of the occupants of the aircraft, other than the pilots, for that part of the flight at those altitudes that is more than 30 minutes duration, and above 15,000 feet MSL, oxygen to each occupant of the aircraft, other than the pilots, for 1 hour, unless at all times during flight above that altitude, the aircraft can safely descend to 15,000 feet MSL within 4 minutes, in which case only a 30-minute supply is required. Oxygen for medical use by passengers. Alright, so limitations and restrictions do not apply to medical oxygen equipment that is furnished by a professional or emergency medical service for use on board an aircraft in medical emergency when no other practical means of transportation, including any other property equipped with certificate holder, is reasonably available, and the person carried under the medical emergency is accompanied by a person trained in the use of medical oxygen. Passenger supplied oxygen. Except during boarding and deplaning, FARs prohibit passengers from bringing their own supply of therapeutic oxygen into the passenger cabin of any aircraft. Exceptions to this are allowed per SFAR number 106, 14 CFR 121. Alright, autopilot and instrument approaches. The use of the autopilot for coupled approaches is at the PIC's discretion. Other than instrument approaches, the autopilot shall not be used below 500 feet AGL or twice the maximum altitude loss specified in the AFM, whichever is greater. This is a tough one. Sterile cockpit, according to 135-100. During taxi, takeoff, climbs, or descents below 10,000 feet, the cockpit communications and crew activities shall only be directed to the safe management of the aircraft. Caravan guys, it's a little tough for you. Alright. Prohibited activities including eating meals, engaging in non-essential conversations within on the flight deck, and reading publications not related to the proper and safe conduct of the flight is also prohibited. Briefing of passengers before flight. We're not going to go over this. You guys know exactly what we have to talk about when we're doing briefings. All right, you new guys, you guys are going to get the chance to do that during your training. All right. Before departure, the crew shall instruct the passengers on the use of the beverage service equipment, and availability of food, ice, coffee, liquor, snacks, and other items. The aircraft may not be moved on the surface nor take off or land when any food, beverage, or tableware furnished by Tradewind Aviation is located at any passenger seat. No alcoholic beverages may be served to anyone that appears intoxicated, nor may any passenger be boarded if there is an appearance of intoxication. Seats, seatbelt, and shoulder harnesses. Crew members will have their seatbelts fastened at all times while seated. The shoulder harnesses shall be worn for takeoff and landing unless it interferes with the ability of the crew member to perform a specific duty. Passengers, a seat and individual seatbelt shall be provided for each passenger, age 2 and over. An adult may hold children under 2 years of age. If additional seats are available, passengers should be encouraged to have children occupy those seats in an approved child safety seat. All passengers must have their seatbelt fastened for takeoff and landing and any other time so designated by the PIC. Seat position for taxi, takeoff, and landing. Each passenger seat must be in the full upright position for taxi, takeoff, and landing. The trays and tray tables, seat backs must be in the stowed position for those operations. Ground procs. If an aircraft is equipped with the GPWS system, it shall be activated at all times at the discretion of the PIC. Occasions when the system may be disabled are for VFR operations and off-established airport operations where adequate terrain clearance may be maintained visually and system warnings may alarm passengers. Crew members shall respond to all GPWS warnings in a positive manner in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions. This response shall include max power, max performance climb. Reaching land. The aircraft must be able to reach land if an engine fails, so you have to be within glide distance at all times. All right. The crew may fly over water for the purpose of takeoff and landing. In multi-engine aircraft, the aircraft must be able to fly at a weight that will allow you to climb with the critical engine inoperative at least 50 feet per minute at an altitude of 1,000 feet above the surface. During extended overwater operations, careful attention must be paid to actual leg progress in order to verify flight plan winds. The flight should be diverted to an alternate airport if it is possible that abnormal or emergency conditions might be encountered. Engine failure, pressurization, etc. that would cause the flight to have a wet footprint. Alright. No flight may depart under IFR unless the aircraft has onboard enough fuel to fly to the airport to which it is originally filed, thereafter to fly to and land at the most distant alternate airport. Thereafter to fly for 45 minutes at normal cruising fuel consumption. The crew will need to identify an alternate airport if the forecast weather or reports or any combination of them at your destination from 1 hour before until 1 hour after the ETA indicated that the ceiling will be less than 1,500 feet above the lowest circling approach MDA, or if a circling instrument approach is not authorized for the airport, the ceiling will be less than 1,500 feet above the lowest published minimum, or 2,000 feet above the airport elevation, whichever is higher. And visibility for that airport is forecast to be less than 3 miles or 2 miles more than the lower applicable visibility minimums, whichever is greater. Spelled greater wrong. For the instrument approach procedure to be used as the destination airport. When making that determination, you must consider the forecast winds and other conditions at the airport. Any airport used must be adequate for the proposed operation considering such items as size, surface, obstructions, and lighting. Navigation charts and the AFD will help determine if the airport, runway, and ramp weights are suitable. The limits of the usable area and takeoff or landing operation must be clearly shown by boundary of runway marker lights for night operations. Night takeoffs and landings cannot be initiated while carrying passengers unless the PIC has determined the wind direction from an illuminated wind direction indicator or local ground communications. For day takeoffs and landings, the PIC may use personal observations. The PIC may not operate into a private airport without the express approval of the Director of Operations. Alright, contaminated runway operations. We're not going to go over that because it has nothing to do with this time of year. As far as, well,
Home short?
where do you see that on here?
I don't know, I wasn't really paying attention.
Weather, we're going to talk about later. Any questions? Andy. Kill it.